The night my husband proposed, he did it at Gate B12 of Dallas-Fort Worth Airport between a Cinnabon and a Hudson News, 40 minutes before my flight to Portland. He got down on one knee right there on the dirty linoleum floor, and every single person waiting at that gate started clapping. I laughed so hard I cried. I said yes before he even finished the sentence. That was 4 years ago. I still think about that moment sometimes. The smell of cinnamon sugar in the air, the way his hands were shaking, how absolutely certain I was. I was wrong about a lot of things back then. My name is Tara. I was 28 when I married Dominic Farrell and 32 when I finally understood who he actually was. We met through mutual friends at a housewarming party in Austin. He was funny, attentive, remembered every small thing I said. 2 weeks later, he texted me, "I keep thinking about what you said about your grandmother's garden. Do you still grow tomatoes?" I didn't even remember mentioning that. It felt like being seen. We dated for 11 months, got engaged at Gate B12, married at a vineyard outside Fredericksburg in October, the kind of afternoon where the light turns gold and everything looks like it was meant to be photographed. My mother cried. His mother cried. I cried. What I did not know, standing there in my grandmother's pearl earrings, was that the man across from me had done this before. Not the crying. The wedding. The whole performance. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The morning of our 3rd anniversary, I woke up to Dominic making coffee in the kitchen. He'd already set out my favorite mug, the blue ceramic one with the chip on the handle, and he was humming something under his breath. He looked, honestly, like a man completely at peace with the world. That image stayed with me later. I kept coming back to it. How easy peace looked on him. We'd made a reservation at Cala's, the small Italian place on South Congress we'd been to on our first date. I changed my outfit 3 times. I settled on the green dress he once said made my eyes look serious, which he meant as a compliment, and I chose to believe him. Dinner started perfectly. He ordered a bottle of Barolo because he knew I liked it. He told a story about his coworker doing something absurd with the office printer that made me laugh hard enough that the couple at the next table glanced over. He reached across and touched the back of my hand while I was mid-sentence, the way he used to do in the beginning. I remember thinking, we're okay. Whatever rough patches we'd had, the months I'd felt a low-grade distance I couldn't name. The nights he came home late and seemed to be somewhere else, even when he was sitting right across from me. I thought we'd moved past it. I was choosing to believe that. The appetizers came. I was picking at the bruschetta when my phone buzzed in my purse. I almost didn't check it. We'd made a rule about phones at dinner. But something, I don't know what, some instinct I'd been trained to ignore, made me glance down at my lap. The text was from a number I didn't recognize. No name. Just, "You don't know me, but I know what's in your wine glass. Don't drink it. Stand up. Go to the restroom and call 911. Don't let him see this." My first reaction was that it was spam, some kind of weird phishing message. I almost laughed. Then I looked up at Dominic. He was watching me, not in the way a husband watches his wife across a candlelit table, in the way someone watches a door they're waiting to open. When he saw me look up, his expression shifted back into something warm and familiar, so fast I almost missed the shift entirely. "Everything okay?" he said. "Just my sister," I said. "She's being dramatic about something." He smiled. "Tell her we'll deal with it tomorrow." I smiled back. Inside my chest, something had gone very, very quiet. I excused myself to the restroom. I went to the stall at the far end. I read the text 4 more times. My hands were shaking and I couldn't figure out if it was fear or the Barolo or both. I had not touched the wine. I lifted the glass twice and set it back down, distracted by conversation. And now I was standing in a restaurant bathroom, understanding that the timing of that distraction might matter. I called the number back. It rang twice. The woman who answered had a low, careful voice. She asked me if I was alone. I said yes. She said, "My name is Rosalind. I'm a private investigator. I've been watching your husband for 6 weeks. I need you to listen to me very carefully." I sat down on the closed lid of the toilet seat. She told me that 3 weeks earlier, she'd been hired by the family of a woman in Phoenix named Beverly, who had died 8 months ago. Beverly had been married for 2 years. Her death had been ruled a cardiac event. She was 34 and had no prior heart conditions. What the family suspected, what Rosalind had been quietly building a case around, was that Beverly's husband had been systematically introducing a compound into her supplements over the course of months. Not enough to trigger immediate suspicion, just enough to do damage slowly. Beverly's husband's name, before Beverly, had been going by the name Michael Reyes. Before that, in Colorado, he'd used the name Dominic Farrell. I stopped breathing for a moment, just fully stopped. "The man at your table," Rosalind said, "is not who he told you he is." I don't know how long I stood in that bathroom. Long enough that a woman knocked and asked if I was all right. I said I was. I wasn't. Rosalind told me not to confront him, not to go home with him. She gave me the address of a hotel 2 miles away and said a colleague of hers would meet me there within the hour. She said to make an excuse, anything, and leave the restaurant alone. I walked back to the table. Dominic had refilled both glasses. "You were gone a while," he said. I was starting to worry. "I'm fine," I said. I think I'm getting a migraine. I'm really sorry. I don't want to ruin the night, but I think I need to go home and lie down in the dark." He looked at me for a long moment. Something crossed his face that I still struggle to describe. Not concern, more like calculation. Then he smiled and signaled for the check. "I'll drive you," he said. "No, it's okay," I said. "I want to walk for a few minutes. The cold air usually helps. You stay, finish your wine, I'll be fine." He started to push back. I said, "Please, I know you. You'll worry the whole drive and it'll make me feel worse. I'll text you when I'm home." He looked at me across that table with those familiar warm eyes, and I thought about Beverly in Phoenix, who had died of a cardiac event at 34, and I kept my face completely still. "Okay," he said finally, "text me." I picked up my coat and my purse. I did not look back at him when I walked out. I was afraid if I did, he would see it on my face, the knowing. I turned left on the sidewalk. I kept walking. I didn't stop walking until I put 4 full blocks between me and that restaurant, and then I sat down on a bench in front of a closed dry cleaner, and I called my sister. My sister is 6 years older than me and the least dramatic person I have ever met in my life. When I told her what was happening, she was quiet for exactly 2 seconds, and then she said, "Tell me where you are, I'm coming." I told her to go to our mother's instead. I told her to stay there and not tell anyone where I was for the next few days. She asked me 3 times if I was safe. I said I thought so. She didn't push me further on it. She just said, "I love you, be careful, call me every hour." I made it to the hotel. Rosalind's colleague, a quiet, methodical man named Ed, who looked like he'd spent decades doing exactly this kind of work, was already in the lobby. He walked me to a room on the 4th floor. He had a folder. I sat on the edge of the bed and read it. His real name was Dominic. That part was true. Dominic. Oral Baxter. 41 years old, though his documents said 37. Born in Tulsa, 2 prior marriages. One under his real name, that one ended in divorce quietly when he was 26. His first wife later reported to police that money had gone missing from joint accounts over the course of their marriage. 18 months of small amounts, adding up to roughly $90,000. The case was never prosecuted. After the divorce, he reinvented himself. New state, new name. He became Marcus Webb in Nashville, then Connor Priest in Denver. That's where Rosalind believed he'd started escalating. No longer just financial. The woman in Denver, whose name I won't share because her family requested privacy, had survived but spent 3 months in a hospital with what her doctors called an unusual toxic presentation. She recovered. She never knew why she got sick. Then Dominic Farrell in Colorado. Then Michael Reyes in Phoenix, where Beverly didn't survive. And then, eventually, back to Dominic Farrell in Austin, where he met a 28-year-old woman at a housewarming party and remembered what she said about her grandmother's tomatoes. I want to tell you that reading that file made me feel strong and clear and righteous, that I immediately knew exactly what to do. That is not what it felt like. What it felt like was that the floor had dropped out from under me and I was just falling, and nothing I'd believed about my own life was solid. 4 years of memories were reorganizing themselves in real time. The nights he came home late, the way he always insisted on making my tea himself, The supplements he'd started buying for me 6 months ago, expensive ones in amber glass bottles that he'd said were for energy and hormonal balance, and that he researched carefully, he said, because he wanted to take care of me. I had been taking them every morning. I sat on that hotel bed and thought about that and felt something I had no name for. Ed told me to go to the ER that night to be evaluated. He was gentle but direct about it. He said they wouldn't necessarily find anything. These compounds are difficult to detect without knowing exactly what to look for, but that it needed to be documented. That documentation would matter later. I went. My sister met me there. I will spare you the details of that night except to say they found elevated markers for something. The attending couldn't tell me definitively what it meant, but she looked at me in a way that told me it wasn't nothing, and she referred me to a specialist, and she said I had made the right call coming in. The next 6 weeks were the most surreal of my life. I went back home once while he was at work with my sister and Ed. I packed what I needed. I took the supplements. Ed logged them and sent them to a lab in Houston. Rosalind coordinated with the Austin PD and, separately, with the Phoenix investigators who had Beverly's case. There was a detective on Beverly's case, a woman named Ferris, who had apparently never stopped working it, even after the official ruling, who had been waiting for something exactly like this to surface. When she got Rosalind's call, Rosalind told me later, she sat in silence for a long moment and then said, "Tell me everything." I didn't go into hiding exactly. I stayed with my sister. I went to work. I did not tell my coworkers anything. I kept my phone on me at all times. I answered Dominic's texts, short, calm. "I'm staying with my sister for a while. I need some space. I'll explain when I'm ready." He pushed back gently at first, then less gently, then he stopped. That's when I knew he was starting to understand that something had shifted. The lab results came back on a Thursday. I was in my sister's kitchen drinking coffee when Ed called. He spoke slowly and clearly, the way careful people do when the news is serious. The supplement bottles contained a substance that did not match the ingredient list on the label. One of the compounds was consistent with a class of toxins that, at low doses over extended periods, could cause cardiac stress, fatigue, and cognitive disruption. It had been added deliberately. It was not a manufacturing error. I poured my coffee down the sink. I don't know why. I just needed to do something with my hands. They arrested him on a Tuesday morning. He was in the parking garage at his office building. Detective Ferris flew in from Phoenix. Austin PD handled the actual arrest. Rosalind called me when it was done. I was at my desk at work when she called. I stepped into the stairwell and she said, "He's in custody." I didn't say anything for a second. She said, "You okay?" And I said, "I don't know yet." The charges were extensive: attempted poisoning, fraud, identity fraud, and in Phoenix, murder in the first degree. They had enough now to refile Beverly's case as a homicide. His real history came out in the weeks that followed. It was worse than the file. There was a fifth woman, a woman in Knoxville I hadn't known about from years before Nashville, who had spent 18 months trying to get anyone to believe her and had given up. She came forward after the arrest. She was 53 years old, and she cried on camera, and I watched it on my laptop at 2 in the morning, and I thought about how many times that woman must have wondered if she'd imagined it. She had not imagined it. None of us had. The trial lasted 11 days. I testified on the 4th day. I want to tell you that being on the stand felt powerful, cinematic, that I looked across the courtroom and felt something resolve inside me. Honestly, it just felt like work. Careful, necessary work. I focused on the questions. I answered what I was asked. I did not look at him more than twice. What I do remember is this: when I walked out of that courtroom, my sister was waiting in the hallway. She didn't say anything, just stood up and held out her arms. And I walked into them and stayed there for a long time. He was convicted on all primary counts, sentenced to 32 years. The Phoenix conviction added additional time. He will not be out on my lifetime at any reasonable calculation. People ask me sometimes how I missed it. I understand why they ask. I've asked myself. For a long time I turned it over looking for the exact moment I should have known, the specific red flag I dismissed, the version of events where I'd been smarter or more careful. Here's what I've settled on: I didn't miss it because I was naive. I missed it because he was practiced. He had done this at least 5 times. He knew exactly how to present himself and exactly how to sustain that presentation. He was, in the most clinical sense, very good at what he did. And also I loved him, or I loved who I thought he was. That version of him was built specifically to be loved by someone like me, and it worked. That's not a failure on my part. That's just what happened. The supplements are gone, the blue ceramic mug with the chip, that one I kept. I don't know why, it just felt important not to throw everything away. I still drink my coffee from it, it's just a mug. I still live in Austin. Different neighborhood, different apartment, a little more light than the old place. I have a garden on the balcony, tomatoes, because my grandmother grew tomatoes and I always meant to. Some mornings I wake up and I feel the full weight of the years I spent in that house and what was slowly happening to me in it, and I sit with that for a while before I get up. Other mornings I just make coffee and water the tomatoes and think about what I want for breakfast. That second kind of morning is becoming more common. I am still here. That is the thing I come back to when I need to. Whatever he planned, however it was supposed to end, I am still here. And he will never touch anyone again. I think about cause and effect a lot now. Not in a dramatic way, just quietly, while I'm watering the tomatoes or driving to work. The way one small decision ripples out into everything that comes after it. If I had drunk that wine, if I had ignored the text the way I almost did, the way every reasonable instinct said to, if Rosalind hadn't made the choice to find my number and take a risk on a stranger, if Detective Ferris hadn't kept Beverly's case open when everyone else had moved on, none of those things happened in isolation. Every one of them was a choice made by a person who decided that what they knew mattered enough to act on. That's the thing I keep coming back to. Dominic built his entire life around the assumption that people wouldn't trust what they noticed, that a woman who felt a little tired, a little foggy, a little not quite right would accept the explanation offered to her and keep going. He was right about that for a long time, across multiple lives and multiple women. The system worked because we were taught to doubt ourselves before we doubted the people closest to us. I was 32 years old and I had been slowly getting sicker for months, and I had told myself it was stress, work, not sleeping well. I had stood in the bathroom at 2 a.m. thinking something is wrong and then walked back to bed and said nothing. That's not weakness. I want to be clear about that. That is what happens when someone is very deliberately working to make you distrust your own body and your own mind. It's a kind of precision. He knew exactly how much to give and how much to withhold. The sickness was meant to be invisible, gradual, a thing with no clear cause. What stopped him was other people refusing to let it stay invisible. Rosalind didn't have to call me. She had enough for her case without me. She made a choice to put a stranger's safety ahead of her own convenience, and that choice is the reason I'm sitting here writing this. Ed drove to that hotel at 9 p.m. without hesitation. Ferris kept a dead woman's file on her desk for 8 months because she believed something that no one could yet prove. There is a version of integrity that doesn't require recognition. It's just the decision to do what you know is right even when it costs you something, even when no one is watching, even when it might not work. I've seen that version of integrity up close now. It looks like a phone call made to a stranger at a restaurant. It looks like a lab report filed carefully in a folder. It looks like a detective who doesn't close a case just because the paperwork says to. I didn't save myself that night. Not entirely. I had help from people who chose to show up, but I did one thing that mattered. I listened. I sat in a bathroom stall with shaking hands, and I chose to take seriously what I was being told, even though every surface of my life was arranged to make me doubt it. That took something. I know that now. Trusting your own fear when everything around you says you're overreacting. That's not small. The tomatoes are coming in well this year. Better than last. I don't know what my grandmother did differently in her garden, but I think about her when I'm out there in the mornings. This woman I only knew as steady and practical and quietly sure of herself. I'd like to be that eventually. I'm working on it. Whatever was building in my system over those months, whatever he was slowly doing, it didn't finish the job. The body heals in ways the mind hasn't caught up to yet, and the mind catches up eventually too. I'm still figuring out who I am on the other side of this. Some days that feels like loss. Most days it just feels like a beginning.